Technical difficulties seem on par for this kind of week, though. If I'm being brutally honest here, it just seems like it fits the narrative.
Yeah.
We're a few
What
minutes
a,
late, and
what a night.
yeah, it's not going to be a normal show. I don't know if you looked at the show notes, but it's so. What more can you say at some point on the tactics, right? Like it gets to a point where you're looking at the stats and the passing networks and the tactics and how the players are playing off of each other. And I think what was said last night at the post game press conference was necessary. I think
Yeah.
it had reached that point. And on some level, it's comforting what was said and how we can approach this now because it feels like rock bottom. At least that's how I feel.
Yes, but we thought rock bottom was a couple of weeks ago when Bradley Carnell was dismissed and starting with a new coach and things started well, but just
So
not
what is
not
rock
looking
bottom,
good.
you're saying?
Well, I guess this is the new rock bottom, but yeah, something has to change. 11 games to go, and now just a huge task ahead. Have to get a lot of points in 11 games.
I don't even think it's the system, honestly. Like Daniel Gavura in our chat asks, I said, I get Lutz said the system, and we haven't even started recording the pod yet, but I get Lutz said the system won't change, but should it? I don't even think it's the system that's the problem. On one level, I thought at the end of the game last night, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but if you're looking at tactics on what the biggest thing was, it to me was Nook v. Thorson. And that's just one facet of it. It's not like if Nook v had changed what I'm about to say, then it would have made a massive difference. But how many times have we talked about the role of the striker in our system? It's a two-way role. It's not just to score goals, but it's to initiate the press. And one of the first things I noticed last night is how I struggled to find the right word, whether it's I said cerebral at one point, I said timid at another point, lacking aggression, but Thorson was not very intentional in his push points for his pressing. And that was consistent. And when he does that, when he does or doesn't do that, it changes the entire dynamics from the front to the back on our press and how we're able to take those off the ball scenarios and turn them on the ball. It was like he had a good finish there. He stuck with the ball, and he was basically the only player who actually finished or had a good opportunity on a second chance ball last night, because there were a few chances, but that was disappointing in watching him press. And I need to go look back at previous games, Santi, because I don't honestly remember. I don't remember paying attention as much to that because of all the other things going on. But the view that I had last night from the game was right above there, and watching Thor off the ball. He even referenced it post game, but just one thing.
Yeah, just nothing seemed to go well last night. Second half, had a couple of chances to equalize it, and then just Vancouver. To me, it looked too easy for them. They weren't even. I don't think they were even like trying really hard. And
Yeah,
but
the second half did have a few good chances right off the bat. But you ready to do this? Ready to record a pod?
yeah, let's do it.
Let's see where it takes us. Welcome in everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined as always by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for another Flyover Footy's Fallout, looking at the most recent match for St. Louis City. This one is quite possibly the most disappointing in the history of St. Louis City, you could argue. A 4-1 loss at home to the Vancouver Whitecaps, a team that we had played twice in 3 weeks now, a team that cost our previous head coach, Bradley Carnell, his job to a certain extent. And after this match, a team that has really forced some hard questions to be asked about St. Louis City, not just tactically, but as we're basically going to kick this show off with uh, a fragmented locker room. And I think the takeaways from this game have to start with the post-game press conferences, right, Santi?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody basically said it was a bad performance, and yeah, some interesting comments for sure.
When we talked about how to approach this episode, I think it was very clear to both of us that the traditional look, starting 11, game flow, important notes, highs and lows throughout, wasn't the right approach to this game and this moment. And it comes at a pivotal time for St. Louis City, not just because Bradley Carnell was dismissed a few weeks ago, but because this really feels like a turning point in the season and not in a good way either. It feels like we have reached the point with 11 games left in the season that the playoffs may be out of reach. And it's a disheartening thing it's a sobering thing to think about at this point already. And knowing how crazy MLS seasons go, knowing how anything can happen, we used to point back to SKC's start to last season as an abysmal start. They hung in it, and then they picked up after Leagues Cup where they needed to. And yeah, it's still possible. We're not mathematically eliminated by any stretch of the imagination, but when you look at the standings and you see that we've now fallen below Sporting KC in the Western Conference table with 22 points in 23 games now, and you take away not just the performance on the field, but the comments afterwards from interim head coach John Hackworth, from Edu Leuven, a man who has worn the captain's armband and is on the leadership council for St. Louis City, comments from Chris Durkin and Nukvi Thorson, and you understand a little bit more about what was going on the field and what's occurring behind the scenes, which is much bigger and much different than just a head coach not able to get the most out of his players, which was one of the prevailing narratives when Bradley Carnell was dismissed. So Santi, I'm going to just say a few quotes to frame this narrative, because I don't know that all of our listeners or viewers on the live stream have seen the post-game press conference or read the comments. I was trying to live tweet them out last night, but it was shocking. Like, I was getting goosebumps at certain times when Durkin and Leuven especially were talking in the way that they were framing certain things. But John Hackworth started it off late to the press conference a little bit. Usually they start 15 minutes after the final whistle. And he said that, I'm sorry for being late. We just had a come to Jesus moment of sorts in the locker room. And he goes on to say that that performance is embarrassing. It's not acceptable to the club, to the fans, and to the city. We're embarrassed, and we have to own that. And that's how this press conference was framed. And you juxtapose that with how Bradley Carnell at times, most often, even to the dying embers of his coaching this team, was looking for positives. And Hackworth got to the point where even when asked about Nukvi Thorson's goal, he said, I don't want to say a lot of positive in this press conference because there's not a lot of positive. He went to credit Thor a little bit, but he was very sure in his candor about the takeaways that you can have from this game.
Yeah, yeah, he was very honest, and yeah, just the way he opened the presser, saying that they just had a come to Jesus moment in the locker room, that kind of tells the whole story. And then you look at the other remarks from the other players. Yeah, something is not happening, and things are not good in the locker room, in my opinion, based on all the things that were said last night.
The reason that we have that and not just an embarrassing performance, because Hackworth's comments in and of themselves, talking about the performance overall as interim head coach, he has to take responsibility. Not many positives, embarrassing. Talking about the second goal that they scored was predictable in how they executed it with Brian White's brace. But you had Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin in particular speaking, and I think their comments were the most revealing. Edu Leuven opened his portion by really saying it was horrible performance, bad body language, no belief, no desire or hunger to win, defended horrible. He said they have to figure this out. He referenced San Jose being an amazing game, Colorado in many ways not bad, which is what Hackworth said during that Colorado postgamer, where he said we played great for 80 minutes, or good enough to be in the game for 80 minutes. Not great, but good enough to have a chance. Tonight it was very bad, Leuven said. It wasn't a bad first half. The pressing wasn't good, but we were caught sleeping, Leuven said. And then he goes on to say that their heads are down, the body language isn't there, and you can tell the belief isn't there, and that's not good enough. There has to be more hunger, more desire to win this game. But Santi, from an Edu Leuven perspective, the thing that was most eye-opening to me is his candor in just how he was thinking out loud during this press conference. To me, I saw an Edu Leuven who was searching for answers real time and having to try and present some kind of reasoning and some kind of insight into the locker room. And he goes on to wonder if it's the mentality of the guys. He was asking himself too about the pressures and differences between an MLS season, an MLS league, Major League Soccer as a league year in and year out versus European leagues. And when you have a lot of these players who have experience in helping a team rise up with promotion, helping a team fight against the death knell that is relegation, you have these high stakes. And Leuven went on to talk about those, the pressure differences between Europe and here, not making the playoffs versus going down, talking about referencing relegation. He's talking about the stakes, and the players need to be critical of themselves. And this was not just eye-opening from a sense that you're having Leuven talk about the realities of this team, but this goes into some pretty deep-rooted things about when a team is struggling in this league that they don't have the most familiarity with, and they grew up with the rigors of what pro rel means. This was fascinating and a little bit scary to hear him talk about the fact that it seems like some of these players and these leaders on the team who were asked to be the biggest contributors are wondering how they can fire themselves up when you're going through a stretch like this.
Yeah, that was eye-opening to me, and I know we're not here to talk about promotion and relegation, but
Mm-mm.
he's right. Like in Europe and even in South America, you still have something to fight for. If you are at the bottom of the table, you are risking getting relegated. But here, you start thinking about next season. Yeah, if we don't make the playoffs, nothing is gonna happen. So let's move on. And I think something is part of the mentality right now. Maybe is that is okay. The season is out of reach. Let's move on. Let's start planning for next season. That's what I get from some of the remarks last night. That
Mm-hmm.
there is a fragmented, divided locker room, and just 11 games to go, and too many points that the team will need to get. So I don't know if the team is going to be able to get those points, but hopefully things can turn around. And there is always Leagues Cup, and you always have the last portion of the season with all the new players and a healthier team. But yeah, just things are not looking good right now.
And you're in League's Cup is something to look forward to. I think the comments from Hackworth also included that they should be getting some guys healthy for Seattle. I'm not sure if he's referencing Joachim Nilsson able to go 90 or maybe Rasmus Alm making an appearance. He wasn't clear, but he said injuries should be, the couple guys should be coming back, referencing Cedric Teuchert and potentially Girdwood Reich for Sporting Kansas. That was an opportunity that Hackworth mentioned. And then this is such a different scenario of us going into the Leagues Cup break, quote unquote, versus last year when we truly felt like this was a time to rest, get healthy for the stretch run to compete for a conference title of sorts. I do think that we went into this game as strong of a lineup, as healthy of a lineup as we possibly could have. I thought it might have been a turning point in the opposite direction where you're getting Leuven back healthy. You have Berkey back healthy. The starting 11 that we ran out last night was pretty good. with Berkey, Totland, Yarrow, Parker, and Reed as our defenders, Blom and Durkin in the midfield, Klein, Leuven, Indy, and Nukvi Thorson up front. You had Leuven back in that 10 role. We were optimistic with that, if only for the fact that it gave us an extra attacker off the bench in Jose Kojima to come on and potentially make a difference. Even for all of its qualities in the first half, it didn't reach the point that the players were describing post game and that Hackworth was describing post game until probably, you could say, just before halftime. But I think halftime was probably, something happened in the locker room. I have nothing firm to base that off of, but if you look at what happened in the first half leading up to the halftime pause, the way the team came out in the second half was, it did have some fire to it, but once that third goal hit, I felt that was a turning point. But the beginning of the game, I mean, Santi, we talked off air before we started recording that I thought, in retrospect, Nukvi Thorson's performance deserves a little bit more scrutiny than even I was willing to give it real time. Not from a goal-scoring perspective. Thought Nukvi Thorson did as good, if not better, than anybody on the team in his shot-producing capabilities. But it was the press. It was the other responsibilities that Thorson's number 9 striker role have on this team that, from the first whistle, I thought left some things to be desired. And if you think through what this St. Louis City team does off the ball, constantly talking about the system is designed to take your defensive shape and immediately turning it into goal scoring opportunities through the press, through high turnovers. Nukvi Thorson wasn't as sure-footed of an initial presser as Klaus is regularly, ever. He never had that quality I saw of, he knew when to push at a center back. He knew when to push the keeper to make them uncomfortable. I don't think the Vancouver 3 center backs were ever uncomfortable in their own defensive half when they had the ball at their feet. They were able to do what they needed to get the ball towards midfield, out on the wings. And it was at those points maybe that we were pushing, but from that first whistle, I never thought that we were making their center backs uncomfortable.
No, not at all. And now that you bring it up, I wasn't thinking about just being Torison, but yeah, I guess the number 9 is the one who starts the press. But yeah, at the beginning, I was like, wow, St. Louis is not doing any press, and Vancouver, like for the first 5 minutes, Vancouver will not give the ball to City, and City wasn't like doing anything to get it back. But that's a good point. I'm not necessarily sure if it was Storison or maybe that's what the team wanted to do, not go high press as they usually do. That's an interesting point. Obviously, yeah, the number 9 starts that press, but to me, it just looked like that's what the plan was, just to sit and wait and not press high as the team usually does.
And it wasn't just Thor, to be clear, but the
Mhm.
reason I call out Thor's performance is because he's the initiator of the press. It's
Right.
his responsibility as the 9, or whoever plays the 9. If Sam's out there, it's his responsibility. Klaus, always his responsibility to initiate the press. And the reason that's so important is because everybody follows suit. The system for St. Louis City, when we talk about the system and the pressing, the gegenpressing, the directness to goal, it is designed around the fact that the first person to initiate a press, it's a cascade effect from everybody behind them. So if you watch how, when Klaus, go back and watch previous games, when Klaus would initiate his press, you have guys like Indiana Vasilev, Johnny Klein, Jose Kojima, whoever it was at the time, even last year, Nico Gioacchini, Jared Stroud, their movements would follow where Klaus would press, what space they would take up, who they would try and go after that initial press. It all cascades. And so if you don't have a strong pressing presence and a sure-footed presence at your number 9 on the defensive side, it's all going to fall apart. And looking at the stats after the game, seeing that we only had 16 total defensive actions in our attacking half the entire game. That's talking interceptions, challenges, clearances, recoveries, block passes, tackles, 16 in the entire game. That's not a St. Louis City style. That is playing on your back feet. That's letting the opposition dictate whatever they want to do, whether they want to possess the ball or whether they want to work direct and just get the ball into their attacking half, it's unacceptable from that point. So if I look at not just the players' comments about being fragmented, about body language, heads down, and I start to look at what they need to do to improve tactically, that's where I start. It's off the ball, in the press, being more brave, as Carnell would always say. That's the biggest thing, because they did come back. If you're talking offensively, they came back after that first goal where it was an awfully allowed goal from Jabula Blom. I don't know what he saw. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if he thought that maybe Chris Durkin was coming back to the ball there at 9 minutes, just 9 minutes into the game when Totland passed it to Blom, and Blom had some pressure in his face. He turned around towards his own goal, and then he went to pass the ball to midfield, and it was perfectly passed in transition to Ryan Gauld, who took it for Vancouver to pass to Brian White for the goal. But even with that, even as demoralizing as that first goal was just 9 minutes in, St. Louis still came back. It was off a set piece. They used what they usually use. They used the powers of being fouled. They used these opportunities to create something, even if they can't get anything in the run of play. And it was great to see Nuk Thorson get on the board again, his second goal against Vancouver of all teams. You know, he is the one player for St. Louis right now who's consistently scoring goals, it seems. And it was unassisted, but you have to credit Thomas Totland as much as anybody. Leuven played it off, which I don't think anybody expected him to do in that set piece.
No.
And Totland had good service. He had a great delivery far post to Thor, who was able to keep the ball, second chance, his own shot, and he scored. So from this point, I mean, I didn't think anything overly pessimistic because we're coming back now. We go down early at home, demoralizing in the way, but we came back. Did you see anything in this first half as this part of the game's progressing that would ever lead you to believe that we'd end up post-game talking about being an embarrassment?
No, not the equalizer. And yeah, even though it allowed that second goal towards the end of the first half, I still thought, okay, they made a good effort to come back, and let's see what the second half can bring. And the second half didn't start bad. Like a couple of chances, chance by Indiana Basilev that I think any other day he will put that one away and score. And then another one by Leuven that was deflected on the goal line. But then after that, that third goal came and things just really fell apart.
The second goal was a dagger in the sense that it happened right before halftime. And we talk on this show a lot about, I think, 3 moments that really impact the game and can change huge portions of the game. It is the beginning of the game, which Vancouver scored. It is right before halftime, which Vancouver scored also, because that dictates how players are going to sit with themselves for 15 minutes. You get off the field after the first half, whatever has just happened, if you're able to take a draw 1-1 into halftime, markedly different than having to sit with yourselves after allowing a 44th minute goal the way that they did. That's why I say I wonder what happened at halftime, because it seems like if you're going to talk, especially post-game, about being an embarrassment, being fragmented, it probably started, or at least was magnified, by what happened in the locker room at halftime. That goal right before half was, I'll let Roman Berkey do the talking, because if you go back and watch the replay, which we both saw, you can not just see the mouthing of these words, it's audible on the replay, on the match itself. Effing ball watching. That's Roman Berkey after Vancouver goes up 2-1 right before halftime. So this goal where it was truly ball watching, and it was Brian White crashing the box, where St. Louis was, in my eyes, the only thing they could have been doing is assuming that Roman Berkey would have grabbed it instead of the block happening. Where Vancouver had a cross in from their left center back, Matias Laborda. The cross was sent to Fafa Picault, who headed it to goal. It was a strong header, and that's why Berkey blocked it away at point blank range. And the ball just kind of sat there for a moment. Picault kept it in play with his head, and Brian White crashed the ball right next to Picault, right by Thomas Totland, kind of blew past him. And this was the first time that ball watching or lack of aggression was occurring from St. Louis City, and it cost him a goal. So for Roman Berkey to note that, and the frustration about how St. Louis can't clear the ball for and giving up a second chance so close to goal. That's what they went into halftime thinking about. That was their mindset and what they were dealing with going into half, sitting there. And so the only halftime sub that's made is Akil Watts for Jabulu Blom, which I don't think anybody's really questioning, especially after Blom had his faux pas gaff of a pass 9 minutes in. But Blom really wasn't doing anything noteworthy. And I looked after the game trying to find out, is this a Blom issue or is this just a St. Louis City issue in utilizing Blom? And I have a lot of thoughts on that. I commented one of them on my Twitter account afterwards, thinking that it's the system in a lot of ways that doesn't utilize what Blom does as a destroyer and
Mm-hmm.
what he did at times and had an ability to do at times last year. He's asked to overextend himself a little bit, do too much, progress the ball a little higher up on the field, be over ambitious. Whatever it was for last night for this game, Akil Watts came in at halftime. And Akil Watts played a much higher position than Jabulu Blom throughout the second half. But no matter how they sat with themselves, what you talked about at starting that second half offered a glimmer of hope. Indiana Vassilev, 50 minutes in, one of the best chances of the entire game, one of the higher XGs of the entire game on a cross that Durkin sent in, almost second nature of a cross, where Durkin, it seemed like it was like a fadeaway shot in basketball, where you're not looking at what you're doing. You turn around and immediately send it over because you see something, a glimmer of what is possible. And Vassilev just can't connect at the end of that. And then 10 minutes later, Leuven has a pretty good chance on the right side where it was kind of the second chance of this nature. St. Louis doing some kind of build on their wing. They're trying to create space with some short passes between Indiana Vassilev and Jay Reed over on the left side. The ball gets sent through on the ground for the second time. And this time, instead of clearing the entire area and finding nobody, it finds Edu Leuven. Leuven has that good chance from the right side, and it was saved by Takaoka, their Vancouver keeper. But that was kind of it. I think that was the last real good opportunity that St. Louis had before things went entirely off the rails. The third goal that you referenced, Santi, 63rd minute. Ryan Raposo gets credit for the goal. It was a goal kick that was pressured by Vancouver. Berkey was being pressured, moving from right to left as he got this ball out. And the 50-50 aerial duel was won by Matias Laborda, the center back for Vancouver at midfield. With all the intensity in the world, he led a charge through Sebastian Berhalter to Ryan Gauld. And then instead of going over the individual moments of what happened there, because there were a lot of touches in the box, Berhalter had a nice little cross on the ground to keep possession. It was the least aggressive that I've ever seen a St. Louis City team be on a loose ball in the box. They looked like they were more concerned about not fouling Vancouver than they were about clearing the ball. Thomas Totland made contact with somebody, threw his hands up while the ball was still in play. Tim Parker couldn't find anything. Josh Yarrow was over on the right side of Tim Parker at this point, near Berkey, and was standing there like he didn't really know where to go for the ball. There was nobody on the left side near Tim Parker towards goal to have that last touch where Ryan Raposo ended up putting the ball in the net. And I felt this in particular. I think I agree with you and what you said. This was, without a doubt, the turning point.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, lack of intensity, and then a bad break. Like Tim Parker tries to clear it, and then it's deflected by Thomas Totland and goes to Brian Raposo, who just finishes the shot. But yeah, lots of chances to clear the ball, and yeah, I noticed what you mentioned about players more worried about not creating a foul. And that then the goal was reviewed for a while. I don't know if there was some contact
Mm-hmm.
in that Tottenham play, and that's why he threw his hands up. He didn't want the ref to assume he had pushed or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that play just paints the picture of what the game was last night. Just embarrassing performance. Many chances to clear that ball to to stay in the game because if Vancouver had not scored, it's still a 2-1 game, and City had done a couple of good things before that, had created some chances, but
Mm-hmm.
just after that, you could tell just the body language wasn't there, the attitude wasn't there, and Vancouver just City made it too easy for Vancouver, in my opinion.
They did. The lack of aggression, the lack of confidence, the lack of playing cohesively. The comments post game they permeate through this show for good reason. They speak to a lack of cohesiveness on the field. Everybody's out for themselves, playing their own whatever they want to do and think that they need to do individually. Uh, because after that, it was more of a Hail Mary after that 63rd minute goal. You had the 70-minute sub. Sam came in for Josh, and it was exactly what you would expect when a striker comes in for a center back. It was needing to find a goal. We legitimately played with one center back for 20 plus minutes, with Jay Reed kind of moving back next to Parker. You definitely had Indiana Vasilev take a deeper role on the left side. It looked like at times he was moved back to a left back, left wing back type of a movement. But you were trying something different. This, I don't know if Hackworth was intentional about this, but it really seemed like he wanted to change things up and try something just vastly different. I truly think it was a Hail Mary type of a call here, because you had a 4-3-3 of sorts, more of Durkin, Leuven, and Watts in your midfield with Thor, Sam, and Klein up top, as opposed to having this one pure striker that was up there. It really seemed like they were trying to change up the way their lines were based, because there was no connectivity between those lines. You had everybody out for themselves. You had no cohesiveness, and you had no ability to progress the ball with any meaning, with any intent. And this continued even through the Kojima for Leuven sub at 77 minutes. It reached a boiling point at that 80th minute when Vancouver scored a fourth goal, even though that goal was called back. St. Louis was playing out of the back on that play. Berkey to Kojima in the middle. Kojima's pass to Klein was stolen. And thankfully, there was a quick handball there on a bounce that had the goal called back. But, I mean, you might as well have just tacked that on too, because it was St. Louis losing possession, being beaten at their own pressing game again in their defensive half. The only other shot that St. Louis had after that was a Tim Parker 89-minute third and final shot on goal. We only had 3 shots on goal this entire game. The XG makes it sound like it was a big deal, but it was just a cleanup type of a shot. He barely touched the ball that was saved by Takeoka. So that goes again to why we're not really focusing too much on stats, because the XG is meaningless if Tim Parker has 0.35 XG on a shot that he barely touches from close range trying to clean up a second chance. And then Vancouver goes on in stoppage to finally get that fourth goal. Fafa Picault. This goal was scored more from Roman Berkey being frustrated than anything else. Jay Reed had the turnover forced on him. It was almost an unforced error. He tried the same kind of flick that he did last week that worked so well. Did you notice this?
I did. I noticed it, and yeah, I made a comment like, well, I guess Ryan Gold knew what
Yeah.
Jay Reed was going to do, and he just stole the ball.
Scouted him well. And this is a reason why nobody is free from fault in this. You don't give any single player a pass for this game. Jay Reed, as well as he's played in the past, had this moment where he tried to go to the well one too many times in this type of a play. He's young. It's going to happen. He's going to figure things out. But the other reason that we were burned on this is because Roman Berkey had been basically playing the last 20 minutes at midfield as much as
Oh
he
my
could.
God, yeah.
There were calls when he had the ball at midfield to shoot, just out of sheer frustration from the fan base. And Roman Berkey could have been chipped a couple times if Vancouver had been able to get the ball at their feet properly. Berkey he knew his positioning, so that in and of itself not a fault of Berkey. He was trying to do something to spark the team when they were down by 2 goals late in the game. But at this point, Fafa Picault had a 1v1, and he was able to play around Berkey as Berkey got back in and nail in the coffin. The garbage time subs, Glover and Wenzel, they didn't really make any difference. They just changed the shape back to more of a 4 in the back traditional. It was a game where I'll go back to the post-game press conference, and I'll go to Chris Durkin at this point, Santi. Chris Durkin said, after speaking after Hackworth and Leuven, that this has to get fixed in the locker room. On the pitch, it's a fragmented group that's not together, and that's frustrating to me and embarrassing. Words are cheap now. It's the action that counts. He reiterated what Hackworth said, and that they might have the quality on the pitch, but they're not gelling. And this is where I really go home with, individuals looking out for themselves at this point, trying to find answers within themselves, do something without taking into consideration the cohesiveness of the team. Durkin says it's the run of results. You go a while without wins, you begin pointing fingers. He says they have to start sinking again. And then he goes on to mention guys are out of contract at the end of the year. They're fighting for jobs as well. And so now you add this extra layer on of it's not just fighting for wins, it's not just fighting for a spot in the standings, but you're looking at how awful this performance was. And now you're talking not just about needing to get up for a reason to win, like you would promotion relegation in Europe or South America. You're talking about trying to play for an individual contract. Are you kidding me?
Well, yeah, it is to that point because if the season is almost gone now, as Chris Dorkin mentioned, some guys are just trying to work for themselves to either get their contract renewed or have good chances to go to another team. But yeah, that was eye opening to me when he mentioned the contract thing, and yeah, he was also very candid about it, like talking about the group be fragmented, not together, and just the performance last night not being good at all. But yeah, to me it feels like when he said fragmented, all I can think about is just two different groups and not together, different goals, different mindset, and it just blew up last night.
This is more than just a couple clicks. You have different competing ideas. He talked about how you have 11 guys on the field and then 4 or 5 come in, almost as if there are different sects of the team, SECTS, where there might be different, I don't know, leaders throughout. It's hard to really pinpoint the exact issue. And one question that I hope to ask this coming week is about the leadership council of this team. The players have a council of leaders on their team. We knew that it was Berkey, Parker, Leuven, and Yarrow at one point. I think Jake Nerwinski was recently added to that, maybe right before Bradley Carnell was dismissed. But what does that look like? And how has that council been holding this group accountable? If you're going to have players, one of the leaders of this team, Edu Leuven, among them, go off about how these players aren't cohesive, they're fragmented, they're not gelling together, their body language is poor, their heads are down. What are you doing as a leadership group of the team to hold everyone accountable? And how are you keeping the team together? The roles that Roman Berkey, Tim Parker, Edu Leuven, Josh Yarrow, Jake Nerwinski, the leaders of these teams, the role that they play is just as much of a spotlight as anything else right now in order to keep this team together when you have players after the game talking about the team's not gelling and they're fragmented. I don't have an answer on where you go from here because it's up to the players. You've gotten rid of the coach. Okay. The coach whose responsibility in this type of a system is not to implement new ways to play. It's take the style that Lutz has built the team around, the fundamentals of the organization that Lutz and Hackworth, as the technical director, have built from the foundation, and it's to implement them for the players. It is to get the most out of the players. Sure, that's what the coach should be doing. So you get rid of the coach because the players aren't doing what is necessary. You aren't getting the most out of the players. The talent is there from last year, you've seen, but this year is different. And so Carnell loses his job. Now, 3 games later, you have a win against the worst team in the league, a team that even SKC was able to beat this weekend. And so, like we talked about, all that win does is just separate you from the absolute pit of the league. San Jose might be tactically and quality wise the absolute worst in the league, and you've separated yourself from them. That's great. Doesn't do anything meaningfully to move the needle when you're losing 4-1 at home against a team that themselves have not had the greatest run of form and have shown themselves susceptible. We went up 2-0 against them in Vancouver. This was a markedly worse performance to me with a better lineup that we took in than we did against Vancouver when Carnell lost his job.
Yeah, and we saw the starting lineup. It was definitely a better lineup than 2 weeks ago against Vancouver when the team lost. But yeah, there is a lot of talent in this group, but I just don't think the chemistry is there right now. And some of the guys have said it before that you see who is a good teammate when things are not going well, and that's not happening at the moment. It looks like everybody's trying to do their own thing, worried about contracts, and just not worry about the team. And yeah, 11 games to go, and mathematically there is still a chance. But I think a lot of guys maybe at this point have had given up and don't think it's possible. So yeah, I think we reached bottom, and yeah, San Jose is still the worst team in the conference. But you mentioned that Sporting KC won last night, so now they leave City on the standings. So City is 13 on the table, and going to Kansas City in a week to fight for their lives. I mentioned before that that's probably going to be an elimination game, and I think it's going to be for sure.
It's not trending in the right direction either because we have Seattle midweek, a Seattle team that's won 4 in a row in Seattle. I think if you're talking about a game that seems insurmountable, that's it right now. More so than just about any game we've played so far. I don't know that anybody in the St. Louis fan base is going to have confidence going into Seattle. I would be shocked if a majority of people had positive score lines predictions after before that game. And then SKC. SKC is also going to be the first game that we have our new players available. Cedric Toyhurt will play. I think that seems pretty obvious to me that Cedric Toyhurt needs to play against SKC because we need to inject new life, new blood into this team. Something is broken to the point where I don't know if the current crop of players is capable of fixing it at this moment. There needs to be some change, some shift on a player base in order to spark something new. And it could be the new arrivals. So when you look to League's Cup, I would expect this to be a team that really tries to pull out all the stops in League's Cup. And in St. Louis, that's particularly frustrating because of the supporter boycott, the issues with the US Open Cup, the frustration around the League's Cup in general, prioritizing over US Open Cup. All these conversations that we've had months ago in St. Louis are coming back to this point now because the MLS season is slipping away, and it's almost slipped away entirely. And so you have new players coming in. You have Toyhurt, you have Jake Girdwood Reich, Marcel Hartel might be available for League's Cup. He hasn't arrived yet, or he might have just arrived this weekend, but he's arriving now to go to start training with the team. And 1 week is he's not going to play in SKC. That's obvious, but League's Cup could be a target for him as well. And then you have players returning. Nielsen will be healthy. Leuven, Berkey back. Everybody. Health is one thing, but you're not just going to take two, then three new players, put them on this team and say, okay, our quality is better. Now we can compete better. Because of these underlying issues that have now surfaced questions about the cohesiveness of the team and the ability for these players to play together at the moment. I don't think you can just say new players coming in of a higher quality is going to make all the difference. You still have to play within the system. The next man up philosophy of this system directly translates to the need to play together. You can't plug and play a center back if your center backs are out for themselves. You can't plug and play a striker if your striker's not going to press like he needs to for the system. And that's where I come to something this week, and in a very limited training week for City, which is extra frustrating. Something needs to change on the training field or in that training center, the locker rooms that they're in. These players have to figure it out. And some people need to step up and say the right words, figure out how to motivate the team and pull them back together. Otherwise, it's going to be a frustrating next few months, more so than it has been.
Yeah, it's been a frustrating season for sure. But yeah, I think it's gonna be up to the players. I think a lot of people are now questioning why Bradley Carnell was dismissed. But I think at this
Yeah.
point is the players. The players have to turn it around, find a way to stay together and fight for the season in these 11 games. And as you mentioned, I think now there's going to be a big emphasis in League's Cup, because that's what could save the season. If the team does well, it could qualify for an international tournament. Think that may not be able to do in MLS regular season. But yeah, it's up to the players, and the reinforcements might help, but I think it's also gonna take a little bit for
Hmm.
them to get used to the group, and that could bring a separate set of problems because now some guys won't get minutes as you give minutes to the new guys. So the team just have to figure out a way to handle the new arrivals, and also just to get it together and play as a team, and avoiding some of the mistakes we have seen in these last few games. If you think about it, Brian White has scored now 7 goals against City. Has scored in every game. He has scored 5 goals this year against City, which basically the leading scorer for City has scored 5 goals. So that kind of paints the picture about what's going on.
Puts it into perspective even more so and reinforces Hackworth calling the second goal by White predictable, and the players and Hackworth saying they knew exactly what Vancouver was going to bring and they brought it and City couldn't stop it. And that's where City is at this point. Santi, we're not going to do a Seattle preview on this show. I'll preview them a little bit for our midweek pod, but at this point in time, doesn't matter who the opponent is. Things need fixed in our own house before we can even consider talking about what the opposition offers that would make for a good tactical matchup. If you have all the issues that we're dealing with right now, tactics become secondary, and you have to fix what's wrong before you can then implement the things on the field that you need to tactically outplay an opposition. That's where I'm at anyway. Any takeaways, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just I guess the only positive for me is that Colombia is playing this afternoon. So looking forward to that. Hopefully, happy day for me. But yeah, just things not going well right now for our team.
If you're listening to this on a Sunday after the game, enjoy the Euro finals, enjoy Copa America finals. If you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday, uh, God bless you for still listening to us after a loss like that. We appreciate you sticking with us. Hopefully, we provided some insight into at least our thoughts on what some takeaways are from this and how to view this game in particular, because it's a quick turnaround to Seattle. We'll have more information from the pregame press conference that should be taking place Monday, and then we'll be previewing Seattle for our midweek pod. Stick with the team. I mean, it's tough, but that's what you do when you love your club. You support them through the thick and thin, no matter what's going on. Support the crest. Hope the players play for the crest more than anything else. Play for the city, and we'll see where it goes from here. For Santiago Beltran, my name is Matt Baker. Thank you for joining us on Flyover Footy's Fallout, and we'll talk to you later.
Vamos City.
Always, Vamos City. All right,
To
Santi.
be Have to stay optimistic, you know.
You do. You got to figure out a way. It's tough right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. That was disappointing last night to see fans leaving so early.
Oh, that was another dagger. I'll say the dagger after the beginning of after the end of the first half, the dagger of the third goal, and then it just. I think it was after the third goal when it happened, but the mass exodus was so sad.
Yeah, that was really sad. But it is what it is.
It was gonna happen. It always happens at some point. I mean, it's just the dream can only go on for so long in the entire lower bowl standing, massive noise throughout. I mean, things are going to reflect the play on the field no matter what. It's not a knock on St. Louis. It's not a knock on uh, the soccer fans in this city. It's a knock on the team on the field. I mean, we're fans who pay money to go see a team, and people can do whatever they want with their ticket and with their time. And just like every other sport, you're going to go and support and give as much enthusiasm as you can. But when you start to see what happened in the second half, and then almost reinforced by the players' comments, like you can't blame anybody for saying, I'm not sitting through this for the full 90. I
Yeah,
paid. I see the performance the players have. I see the body language that Edu Leuven was describing. I can't fault anybody for leaving. I'm not going to make an argument that if you pay for a ticket, you have to stay for 90 minutes no matter what. It's not my place to say. It's not anybody's place to say. And when you have comments from the players afterwards that back up that kind of line of thinking where they're disappointed in their own performances, why would you feel required to stay? Personally, I'm not going to leave early. It's my choice,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to fault anybody. I'm not going to get into that argument and say you have to stay because it's a sporting event, it's your team, you paid for the ticket. That's not appropriate to me.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, you and I think a different way. Like, yeah, you should stay the whole time. But yeah,
Yeah.
people are free to do what they want, especially after such a disappointing performance. But yeah, we'll see what happens the next 11 games. Big week coming up. Doesn't start. Um, it starts against Seattle, and now playing on turf. So who knows if some players maybe will be rested and maybe kept for Sporting KC. I don't know. It will be an interesting week for sure.
It's another thing like with Vancouver, that 3 match day week, play on turf. You had Berkey stay home. You wonder who's going to be available for this match, who's going to go, and I don't know. I do think that I didn't we didn't mention it in the pod, but one of the things about the new guys coming in is it is a dysfunctional locker room that they're stepping into. That it's fact now that there's when you have players calling it fragmented, it's fact that it's a dysfunctional locker room right now. But they're professionals at the same time. I mean, you don't have Girdwood Reich, even if he's only 20 years old, but you don't have Cedric Toyhert coming in, Marcel Hartl coming in and saying, you know, I've never seen anything like this. They're professional soccer players. They know the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs.
Yeah,
I mean, it's unfortunate that they're stepping into this particular instance as opposed to like what Thor and Marcanic had to step into last year. But they're professionals. They're gonna put in the work. They're here long term. Toyer's here for a couple years at least. Girdwood Reich's here until 2028. So I don't know.
yeah.
I think the new players. Jerry Hayes asked, "What do you think the new players are seeing?"
Oof.
I think they're seeing disappointment in probably what they were sold and what they know St. Louis did last year versus what's happening now. But maybe they also see opportunity, right? Maybe they also see that their role is now that much more important. And if you're a player, if you're a professional soccer player, you have the aura, the confidence. You think that you're hot shit, so to speak, right? That's what your mindset is and should be. And so maybe there's a sense of I'm going to come in and help fix this.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a sense of it's not sadness and frustration that you're stepping into this and you have to deal with this. I'm sure there might be a level of that, but I look for it as hopefully it's more of Toyhert and Girdwood Reich and Hartl coming in saying, we've got work to do. And I'm going to help fix this team. I'm going to help turn this team around. I'm going to be meaningful, contributable. I'm going to help right the wrong as far as their confidence goes. And my play can impact this just as much as anybody. I can be the turning point. That's what I hope that they're bringing into this right now.
And I hope so. I hope they come with that mindset, and the team, regardless of where the team is in the standings at the end of the season, I hope they make an impact, and you have something to look forward to for 2025 if the team
Mhm.
doesn't make the playoffs. But Matt, this season to me is like what season should have been, and the team
Mhm.
having that successful season last year obviously created a lot of expectations. But yeah, hopefully with the new guys, things will change. Do you think the team will have more transfer activity, or do you think this is it?
I don't think this is it. I I still think we're going to move Sam because his contract's out at the end of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and they've still mentioned the transfer trade talks. I think and if and when he gets moved, I think Lutz is going to have a corresponding move to bring
Okay.
somebody in. I the transfer window hasn't even opened yet. Like
Right.
we're sitting here thinking Lutz is doing his work ahead of time, and once the window opens, our new players are just going to be able to play, and then we're done. I think there is an underlying thought in the fan base that like there hasn't been much thought given to moves can occur during the transfer window. Like that's when a deal can be signed, and so we have a month. We have a month of this window being open that Lutz can still make moves. His big board's always full. It's always moving. He has
Right.
moving targets of what position he needs and who's possible to get. These things go on all the time. If I was a betting man, I would say that we're not done making moves by bringing in these three players, by sending out AZ Jackson, by signing Klein, Wenzel, and Reed contracts. It's been such a massively turbulent year in the roster itself. The more you think about it, on top of injuries, but it wouldn't surprise. I would be more surprised if we were entirely done. Like if Sam stayed, if we didn't sign anybody else, because our roster's full basically, except for the 2 injury replacements for this season. But I think there is also a long-term thought of you're not going to bring back some of these guys. And so
Right.
if you whether you sign a midfielder, an attacking winger, you can fill their spot. You can fill Ostrak and Salio's spot now.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing that Salio and Ostrak are both coming back for next season, you're going to have some players who are gone. We'll probably have a handful, half a dozen guys who don't come back, whether their team options are declined, whether they're just out of contract and we don't renew them. There are multiple scenarios of both of those. Parker's straight up out of contract. Guys like Jabulu Blom have options. Chris Durkin, I think, has options after this year. But, we're going to have that flexibility that I think Lutz is going to proactively say, I'm going to bring somebody in to be an injury replacement now, but I know we can keep them into next season after that, because we're going to let some of these guys go. That's why I think that he's going to be a little more willing to use up some of these roster slots versus maybe in the past purposefully leaving himself some flexibility if he can find the right people, both mentally, physically, and tactically for the system.
So 2 slots. That's all we have to work with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. 2 slots with bringing in Hartl, Girdwood Reich, and Cedric Teuchert, along with signing Wenzel, Klein,
Mm-hmm.
and Reed. Wenzel, Klein, and Reed all filled up our supplemental roster. So our supplemental roster is entirely full right now, even with Tyson Pierce on loan. So he's like kind of an extra guy on top right now. So he'll be another person to bring back for next season. But we're quickly filling up the roster, and that's why I think it's more likely that we sign somebody if we move somebody. Like we can and probably still should find somebody else to bring in to help raise the quality, but I think Sam will get moved, and I think that'll open up a slot.
All right, we'll see. Transfer window starts next week, and on to figure things out with hopefully moving some players out, bringing other players in. We'll see.
This was also just a weird week in MLS. Like Robert Clar in our chat was talking about, the only solace I have is if you look at LAFC,
Yeah.
BMO Stadium had the same thing happen with the max exodus of fans after they were run off the field 5-1 by Columbus after their 4th goal. So like San Jose lost to SKC. SKC finally won. Columbus beat LAFC 5-1. Real Salt Lake, another top team in the West, was beaten by Portland 3-0. FC Cincinnati lost to Charlotte 3-1. I mean, this was just a weird week in MLS, and we unfortunately are just part of that weirdness now, where we have to deal with the personnel, locker room issues on top of just being a poor performing team right now. So I can't wait to watch the Euros and Copa America final. That's all I got right now.
Yeah, we have something to look forward to later today.
Yep.
After what we saw last night, so let's end it there.
Let's end it there. And yeah, Jerry Glover's on the first team. He has a homegrown contract, so he's with us for a few more years.
I was disappointed he came in so late. Last night.
At least he got an appearance. It was a cameo appearance, but at least he saw. We'll talk about him more later. Yeah. We'll end it there. All right, Santi. Go Colombia.
Let's go, Colombia. Vamos.